In what is probably a really good example of karma, a member of the Exonerated Five, originally known as the Central Park Five, has decided to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times against Donald Trump. Awesome. So let's get to the details. Yusef Salaam, again, one of the 5 exonerated members of the group of Black and Latino teens that were wrongly convicted of a 1989 rape in New York City's Central Park, and is now, by the way, a candidate for New York City Council, posted both a tweet and an official op-ed page from the New York Times on the day of Donald Trump's arraignment and arrest. In fact, here's his tweet. Over 30 years ago, Donald Trump took out full-page ads calling for my execution. Here's my ad in response. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I suggest that you check it out as well, because it's pretty great. So, look, he detailed, of course, what Donald Trump had said about him and the other teens in his op-ed, including the fact that Donald Trump, after calling for his execution, and then after the exoneration, the fact that Donald Trump never even took back his statements for calling for their execution for the crimes that they had never committed. Salaam wrote this: "Now, after several decades in an unfortunate and disastrous presidency, we all know exactly who Donald J. Trump is. A man who seeks to deny justice and fairness for others while claiming only innocence for himself." Yeah, true. Very, very true. Now, look, Salaam and the 4 others, Corey Wise, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, Antron McCray, they were exonerated in 2002, as well as, of course, DNA evidence showing them, or showing the police who the actual attacker was. Despite that, Trump, again, never walked back his comments. In fact, in 2019, he said this, quote, you have people on both sides of that. They admitted their guilt. Bro, they were exonerated. That means they didn't do it. They didn't do it. All you could say is, oh, wow, they didn't do it. Well, obviously, since they're innocent and were proven innocent and exonerated, well, I was wrong. How hard is that? How difficult is it for Donald Trump to admit that he was wrong on something where he was factually wrong? No.
Can't let that happen.
No, we cannot. We can never admit that you're wrong. Never apologize. They must have done something wrong. I mean, look, they admitted they were guilty. Yeah, that's because they were beaten by police officers and forced into a confession. Apparently, though, that doesn't mean anything to Trump, because at the end of the day, what are they to him? They're minorities. Those people. They must have been guilty of something anyway. You know how they are. Criminals. Rapists. Even if they didn't do it that time, I'm sure they did it to someone else. And besides, people on both sides of that. What are you talking about? What both sides? What sides? Now, Salaam continues by saying, quote, here's my message to you, Mr. Trump. In response to the multiple federal and state criminal investigations that you were facing, you responded by warning of potential death and destruction, and by posting a photograph of yourself with a baseball bat next to a photo of Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. These actions, just like your actions leading up to the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, are an attack on our safety. Now that you have been indicted and are facing criminal charges, I do not resort to hatred, bias, or racism as you once did. Even though 34 years ago, you effectively called for my death and the death of 4 other innocent children, I wish you no harm. He then instead wishes that Trump gets, quote, the presumption of innocence and a fair trial, which I agree with. But he does point out the fact that they didn't get the presumption of innocence and a fair trial. They served years in prison for a crime they never committed. And unfortunately, this happens in this country all the time. He said, then if the charges are proven and you are found guilty, I hope that you endure whatever penalties are imposed with the same strength and dignity that the exonerated five showed, as we served our punishment for a crime that we did not commit. Look, this is a great example of someone who was a victim of the system that had abused them. And no doubt they were victims of the system. They're also, again, secondarily victims of Donald Trump, who wanted them, again, murdered for something that they didn't actually do. And also, it's a great example of somebody who had been through this and is trying to do better. Look, again, Trump claims that he's a victim. He's the biggest victim, the most victimized victim. I've been treated worse than Lincoln. No, Lincoln was literally murdered. You've not been treated worse than Lincoln. You've not been treated worse than Jesus. I'm not entirely sure if Donald Trump referred to himself as Jesus, but certainly there are Republican politicians like Marjorie Greene who have compared him to both Jesus and Nelson Mandela. I mean, that's insanity. He's nowhere near close to that. But look, the other thing is, with Trump, he's had privilege his entire life. Number one, obviously being born rich. And of course, having the advantages that come with that. But also, just having the advantage of getting the benefit of the doubt. Something Salaam and the other four did not get on account of their skin color background and, yes, socioeconomic status. Look, that's the systemic injustice at play. And something Salaam points out. Quote, the issues plaguing Black and brown communities, including inadequate housing, underfunded schools, public safety, and lack of job opportunities, are the same as they were when he was a boy, and became worse under during Donald Trump's time in office. And I think that's really, really important to point out. This is just more than just the dunk on Trump, which, by the way, is fun and well-deserved. But there's also a message here. And I appreciate the message that Salaam points out the problems with not only the justice system, of course, but, again, the issues in the Black and brown community. How you have a legacy of slavery and Jim Crow that exists in the form of basically underinvestment in the Black and brown communities, even in liberal places like New York. I think that's one of the things that's a big disappointment here. When it comes to people that live in, again, Democratic-run areas. Because they ain't perfect. There's really no area that is perfect. And so you do have a lot of these issues in the Black and brown community. And look, one of the other things that's also a disappointment under, I'd say it, the presidency of Barack Obama. Okay? His presidency didn't really address a lot of those specific economic issues the Black community faces. One of those things, by the way, is healthcare. Look, we still have issues with Black Americans running into barriers when it comes to getting the same kind of quality healthcare as their white peers. Now, there's various different reasons for that, of course. There's implicit unconscious biases against them in actual treatment, but there's also just the issue of being able to afford to go and see a doctor on a regular basis, or being able to afford your medication in the system that is for-profit healthcare. As such, all of these issues, which, by the way, again, I'm telling you that they have a huge impact on the Black community, but they also have an impact on all other communities as well. But I think it's disproportionate because what you have here is African Americans that have huge reductions in life expectancy and increases in diseases that, again, could have been managed or could have been prevented had people had access to preventative care and medications. But because of our for-profit healthcare system, we don't have that. And during the time where President Obama had the ability to at least put us towards a public option, which would have been much more affordable, much less, of course, in my view, we should have went for a single-payer healthcare system and expansion of Medicare to everyone. Instead, we had the ACA, which, yes, has done some positive things, but also it's a continuation of this for-profit model that prices so many people out, especially those who are in the lower income spectrum, generally tending to be minorities in the inner city. And not only that, but of course, you have issues with pollution in minority areas, lack of regulation. You have even the lack of trees. Now you might think, oh, wait a minute, lack of trees? Well, how does that have an impact? Well, it leads to more heat-related illnesses, increased temperatures in urban areas. That's a problem. So, and look, I also want to acknowledge that, yes, we can't fix all these systems overnight. No one president could. But at the same time, if you're not actually fighting for universal healthcare or things like free colleges or finding a way to change the way that, for example, we fund schools, like in the inner city, instead of using property taxes, for example, to fund schools, which leads to massive disparities in poor neighborhoods, maybe we ought to come up with a better system. Now, look, President Obama also supported expanding the use of charter schools. Now, that's a problem, and that's a huge mistake, and something that the Biden administration is actually reversing course on, and that's good, because what charter schools have done is funnel wealthier students and, of course, tax money away from public schools, which has had a devastating result on overall education. And again, I'm trying to be fair. It's not like Obama did all terrible things. The focus on universal pre-K is great, but at the end of the day, we don't have universal pre-K. The administration couldn't get it done to be universal, but there was some movement in cracking down on for-profit schools, which, again, overwhelmingly took advantage of the Black community, getting them into debt for, massive amounts of student loan debt. And then for what? Nothing. A useless education, useless degree. At least the Obama administration had tried to, crack down on them and forgive them, when it came to how much they borrowed to go to these for-profit schools. And of course, it's one of those things that the Trump administration and Betsy DeVos, specifically as education secretary, had fought against being able to cancel those specific debts. So look, again, there's a lot of issues here that Salaam points out. And basically what it seems to be to me is that I see that, yeah, in a lot of cases, Republicans, like Donald Trump, they get off and they break things. And then Democrats don't really fix those things that are broken. And maybe they are able to fix some of those things, but Republicans tend to break more than, even the most well-intentioned Democrats can fix. And as a result of that, we never actually move forward. We just keep getting inched back. And it's especially true for minority communities. And so, look, Salaam, I really like that he spoke to it. And also, once again, got this well-deserved dunk on Donald Trump for, again, calling for his execution. And it is what he had tweeted before when the news had broke, of this being karma.